All right. Well, there's more of a delay on that than I thought. Anyways, so here we are. Welcome to Soul Talk, everybody. This is May 27th, 2025, and I am so delighted to have this lady with me. This is Anne Dunnett, and we're going to talk a little bit about seasonal living and seasonal living. We're going to talk a little bit about the power of haiku, especially if you are kind of in that place of looking to get creative with your personal practice, with your personal spiritual practice, maybe a meditation practice or mindfulness practice. I think haiku could be a really interesting way to take that in a new direction or bring a sense of refreshment to it. So we're going to talk about that, and then we'll see where the conversation takes us. So welcome, Anne. I would love it if you just spent a moment, if you would, and just share a little bit with people about who you are, where you are, and a little bit about how you found your way into haiku, and sort of what your world looks like, how you use it right now.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for inviting me to do this. I'm so excited to be here for one thing. So thank you, with much gratitude. And yeah, it's been a winding, weaving road that started when I was actually 10 years old. So a lot of people that I talk to when they first meet me or see what I'm doing with haiku, a lot of people, I don't know if you did, learned about haiku in possibly elementary school or in high school. And that was when I learned about haiku. And what makes it interesting for my experience is that my grandmother wrote haiku poetry. She was really a strong inspiration and influence in my life when I was younger, and I just wanted to be like her. She was creative. She was cool. She was the cool grandma in the neighborhood. Um, and so I had the elementary school assignment in grade 5 to write haiku. So I just put it was obvious to me, to get help, like, to go to my grandmother and grandma, can you write for me? No, can you help me? So we composed a couple of haiku together, and it's interesting because I found a scrapbook when I first started doing more around mindfulness with haiku and teaching people how to write it. And part of my story was to include this. And I found a scrapbook that I had from grade 5, and I found the haiku that I had written with her. So it was really, really special to be able to find that. And then I never thought about haiku again after that. I didn't grow up thinking or having dreams of becoming a haiku poet or writing or anything. I was really drawn to creativity for sure, but it was more art. And I went to art school and I became a graphic designer. And I was living in Vancouver at the time, graduated from Capilano College, had 4 years of art school, and then I was finding that I wasn't really super inspired by being a graphic designer. I was finding the industry wasn't really resonating with my heart and purposeful in my life. So I decided to enter a craft fair, and I used my grandmother's haiku and I started making little cards. And that was when the haiku started to come into my life a little bit more, but I didn't write any for another probably 12 or even 15 years. So it was almost
Wow.
20 years ago when I started to actually write my own haiku. And I got really inspired. I was living in Vancouver, and you're not familiar with Vancouver, I don't think.
Mm.
There's a beautiful bookstore in Kitsilano called Banyan Books.
Oh yes, I know of it.
A very spiritual bookstore. So I found myself going there often, even before I started writing. And I bought this really huge book on Japanese culture, and it had a whole section chapter about haiku in it. And I started reading it, and I started to learn a little bit more about it because I learned that it was all about this 575 syllable count, and that's what most people learn in school. So I started to write and I created everyday haiku and I started going back to doing craft fairs. I've been freelancing as a graphic designer for years. I'm still working as a graphic designer, and this is my passion project.
Mhm.
And I started doing craft fairs, and then I ended up joining the Vancouver Haiku group, and I started going to monthly meetings, and that was when I learned so much more that haiku almost has nothing to do with counting syllables.
Really?
You can write it that way. It gets a little tricky because people can still write it that way, but the focus becomes about counting syllables.
I
And
see.
the true essence of haiku is about being in the moment. It's about capturing a moment and putting it into words. It's almost like taking a photograph and putting it into words. But it goes even deeper than just a photograph because it gets you into your feeling. It takes you almost out of your thinking head into into your body and
Yeah.
to feel the words of the poem. And it's so, so simple. There's such a profound simplicity to haiku where I've noticed that some people scratch their head and go, I don't get this. But it's really about tapping into your senses, the five senses, and creating images and feeling the words that are coming through, but also about being in the moment. And it has a really, really beautiful, deep connection to the seasons and a connection to nature. And I just find that Japan and Japanese culture is so unique and so special. And I think there's so many things that we can learn from the way that they live.
That's really, really interesting. Um, there's a couple things that I would go back on. I don't think you're the first person who has taken their creativity into industry and found there to be a disconnect or something that starts to disconnect them from that. I worked with so many graphic designers and copywriters and just really brilliant like like production people, producers, video, at all of it. And it was so fascinating for me to watch um, at certain times in their career where they would just be so dialed out
Mm.
and they would just really be phoning it in and like showing up and doing the work, but it wasn't really a reflection of that creator soul that lives within all of us, and it's
Mhm.
just expressed differently or at different levels. So I love that you found this. I love that you've this wandering journey around haiku, and it almost feels like, from what I can remember of it, and what I've watched unfold on your Instagram channel, it almost feels like it's a reflection of haiku itself. Like there's this wandering journey
Mm.
around trying to find like what is the poem or what is the haiku. But um, so I'm curious though that you would say that the syllables, counting the syllables, is the way that we're taught. Maybe at least in Western culture, maybe that's not how it's taught in Japan, but and that seems to really appeal to that sort of intellectual Western mindset.
Yeah.
But underneath, what you've found is that there's actually far more of an intuitive, like sensory connection to
Mhm.
this. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because then I'd like to talk about how that ties into this idea of seasonal living.
Oh, absolutely. So I've never been to Japan. It's on the list. Want to go there so badly. And I don't speak the language. I don't know the language that well, but when I was going to these the haiku groups and learning more from other haiku poets, there is a really well-known haiku poet. He's based in Washington State, and he has been to Japan, and he's kind of more like an authority. Like he's really highly knowledgeable with haiku and the history and things like that. So he explained to me at one point that it got lost in translation when haiku went from Japan to the North American school system. And in Japan, they don't even have syllables. They
Mhm.
have sounds. So it's an on. It's just called an on. It's a
Oh,
sound.
wow.
So even with their haiku, because Japanese language goes this way,
Yeah.
they don't even actually have it in three lines. They have their haiku all in one line. So so when it came to the school system, I don't really know exactly what happened, but the focus where it gets tricky is because in Japan they do count. They count the sounds.
Hmm.
And then when it gets translated from Japanese into English, it becomes longer.
Hmm.
So the essence of haiku is very brief, and it's less is more I guess thinking philosophy behind
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
So when I started going to the haiku group, they kept saying, "Don't count any syllables," and I was so used to counting syllables, so it was really kind of a big switch to go from counting these syllables to not counting syllables. And then they were like, well, if you still feel like you need that syllable count, do it more like a 3-5-3 syllable count,
Oh,
which I did for
interesting.
a while. And then I got to the when I started learning more, then I was just like, I threw the counting out.
Mm. I love
and
that.
and it just frees up that creativity of writing. So the way that I write haiku is more of an English language modern style of haiku poetry. And it's really interesting when COVID hit, there was a haiku group that
Yeah.
popped up on Facebook. All of a sudden, all these people started writing haiku. And it's a group that was created, I think, in England. And um, it was really fascinating that people were getting into debates on this Facebook group about people were, this isn't haiku, like people who were saying this, you're not counting syllables, so it's not haiku, so you're doing it wrong. It was really crazy, actually. Like people were getting angry that other people who write like I write, like people who and there's haiku poets like this man that I was talking about, his name is Michael Dylan Welsh. He doesn't count syllables and he teaches, he's really quite funny about it because it's like he's created the symbol that's got 575 and then he puts the do not cross sign over it. But
Oh,
yeah, it
wow.
was really crazy how people were getting really it was a divide. People were
Yeah.
getting really, really upset about it. And I was just
Well,
like, I don't
shoot.
even want to engage in this. I was just like, no, this
Yeah.
is this is not where I want to be. So
I was
I
going to say that seemed to be just something that just got so prolific in
yeah.
2020. Like just everybody getting so divisive and just,
Oh
oh,
yeah, I know.
two sides. Everybody could find something to argue about. It was like, it was crazy to me.
Which I
So,
think
I
is
mean,
still
why would
happening.
haiku be any different, right? What?
I know it was really crazy because I'm like, this is poetry. It shouldn't be
Yeah.
making you angry. So yeah,
No kidding. No kidding. Well, that could be a reflection of a bigger picture, but anyways, we'll leave that for another day.
exactly.
Um,
Did that
so
answer the question?
yeah, I think that was great. I think that was really great. And I was just thinking as you were sharing that I had posted something maybe to Instagram. I don't remember where I posted it. Maybe to Telegram. I can't recall. But it was something to the effect of, the real flex, if you will, is to learn the rules so well that you know how to break them,
Yes.
and then become kind of a badass, because to some people you'll look like a badass because you're breaking all these rules, but you know which ones can be broken.
Mhm.
And that's what really came forward for me as you were talking about this, this syllable, this hang up that the Western world, as we've learned, haiku has had. And maybe it's great, maybe it does work for people, but if it doesn't work for you, then break the rule, because apparently the
Mhm.
rules can be broken. Ah.
Yes.
Apparently. I like
Mhm.
to think that all rules can be broken.
Oh, yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
rule breaker, obviously.
Yeah. So, okay, so haiku, very mindful practice, maybe even a bit of a meditative practice. If you think of meditation in the sense of
Absolutely.
getting into
They're
flow.
just little tiny little meditations.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so, first of all, before we go into a different sort of sidebar to this, if there was a way for people to who wanted to kind of start playing around with this, and I'm going to use that language instead of what I normally, no, I'm going to say, fuck around, find out. What, where would you suggest that they start? Like, first of all, do you have resources that you make available to people for them to learn, sort of just some basics that they could start with? And let's talk about that first.
So are you talking about teaching people how to write haiku?
Both, and both teaching them how to write it, but also like bringing them into using it as a part of their practice.
Yeah. So I'll tell you a little bit more of my experiences, my background.
Okay.
So about 10 years ago, I think I was meditating because I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with haiku. It's been this path of wanting to do something unique with it, but not really fully knowing what that picture is. So it's been this back and forth of fine tuning. So I had this light bulb moment where I was like, "Oh, I'm going to teach people how to write haiku. How hard could that be?" So I created a course and I started doing workshops at retreats, and I'm still learning haiku as well. And what I learned from that in that experience is that I don't want to teach people how to write haiku, because what I was finding is that there's so much to learn about it. Not
Mm-hmm.
only that, but it's almost like you need to live it
Yeah.
before you can write it, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yep.
it's about living really mindfully, but also being very present. So that's a really, really big part of it. And people were also coming to me and going, "What do you think of this? What do you think of this?" And I don't have an English language training background. I'm not an English teacher. So
Yeah.
that was another issue that I was struggling with, because I didn't feel comfortable critiquing or judging, because it's not my expertise.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally came to a place where I am so much more interested and excited about haiku as a lifestyle, as a philosophy, as a way of living. And that is what I want to share with people, is how they can use it as a tool to connect with nature and be in the moment and
Mm.
just be inspired by all of the things that haiku actually represents. So
I love that.
it's not about like some people still want to write, and I'm like, I'll give them tips and here's what you can do, but I don't want to be engaging in giving them critiques or
Mm-hmm.
feedback, because also people were getting frustrated, like they wanted to do it like that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it's a practice. It's not something
Yeah.
that you can just sit down and go, "Oh, I'm going to write a haiku," or a good one.
Well, I think that most writers would say that about anything. You can sit down and write anything. It might not be good, but don't let that stop you. Um, so back to this idea of rules versus maybe principles, because that's kind of how I've started to delineate between these two worlds of, there's people who are really wired for, I need to know what the rules are and I need to stay within a structure, and as opposed to understanding the basic principles and following sort of those principles, because I don't
Mhm.
think that the principles change so much, but the
Mhm.
rules seem to always be changing in
Mhm.
a variety of different contexts. So, in the space where you invite people into, and where you meet people in your own sort of community, do you talk a little bit about the principles and the general sort of even the essence of haiku? Like so, or are people coming in with like no exposure to this and finding their way with you, or are they coming in with just a real passion for haiku and you're allowing that to blossom?
I would say more the first, what was the first part you said?
The first part is the well, just kind of getting a sense of like how are people experiencing haiku with you? Are they starting
Mm.
from scratch with you, or are they already all, down that
It
rabbit
could
hole?
it could be a little bit of everything. Speaking of not everything. I was going to say every day. So one thing that I created to help people understand what I'm doing is the part about the seasonal living, which you
Mm,
mentioned at the beginning. So I've created a circle, which I've done workshops for to educate people what haiku is, and then they join the circle, so they already have a little bit of what haiku is all about,
yeah,
in a workshop,
yeah.
without the teaching how to write part, but it's more around journaling and going out into nature and being really, really present and
Mm,
smelling the air and touching the tree and just doing things like that. So I came up with the concept of everyday seasonal living to get people inspired by the seasons. And because haiku is so connected to the seasons, it just made sense to have a seasonal living portion
mm,
part of
hmm.
what the offer is. I don't know if am I explaining that very well?
I think so, and for as much as it needs to be explained, just trying to give people a bit of a sense of, where would I start if I wanted to be able to start, fucking around with haiku, and where do you start with people? Like where do people need to be on their haiku journey for it
Mm,
to make sense to have conversations with you or explore more of what you're doing? That's kind of where I'm getting at.
mhm. Well, that's definitely one thing. And I also, so I have the circle. Um, I've also started doing markets,
Mm.
which I'm revisiting because I'm kind of doing this circle of circling back to when I was 24, 25 when I started
Yep.
doing my grandma's haiku. So I'm actually designing cards and art pieces and then telling people about the circle, the membership that I've created. And I have created poetry kits. I got to tell you about the poetry kits.
You showed me these, just so you know, everybody. Anne and I were having this conversation, and she's inspired so many things for me to be messing around with. But talk about these kits because I think they're really, really cool. And
Mm.
if you're ever at a market that Anne's going to be at, you want to stop by and check these out because they're very cool.
Yeah, well, so back to when I was doing the workshops, teaching people how to write haiku, I came up with an idea to teach people how to write haiku by composing haiku. So in Japan, they actually talk about composing haiku. That's what they say for writing.
Hmm.
But what I did is I took a whole bunch of my haiku and I stripped them all out. Like I had maybe 20, let's say 20 haiku, and I took all of the lines and I mixed them all up and I put them on an 8.5 by 11 sheet and I printed out these sheets and then I cut them
Hmm.
into little strips. I should have, I wonder if I have one. I should have come a little bit more prepared so I can show you.
Well, it's like those
Oh,
exercises that we used to do in school where we would cut pictures or cut words out of a magazine and then
found
piece them all
some.
together. So this is what I'm talking about here. Yes, love
So I
this.
don't know if you can see this, but these are all little one-liners. So this is one line of a haiku. They're all lines. So what people do you remember? It's funny because when I started doing the shows and I'll talk to people, anybody who's under 40, I'll say, do you remember the poetry magnet kits that you would put on the fridge?
Yeah.
And they look at me like, no. And I'm like, okay. But but
take a
people
different approach with you.
who do understand, who remember them. So it's the same concept. So it's taking these lines, and then I tell people either you can try and figure out what my haiku was, or you can make up your own entirely.
Mm,
So it's a mix and match, and it just gives them a little bit of an entry into what haiku is. So I created these folders. I have a friend that posted on her Instagram. She had made these beautiful Japanese, almost origami style folders. And I messaged her right away and I said, "How did you make those?" So she sent me a YouTube video and I learned how to make them. And I have a whole huge collection of Japanese papers from when I was
mm.
doing art collages. So I started making these folders, and then I got postcards made with some mindfulness tips and a little bit of a practice. Go out in nature, do a mindful walk, and then come back and then compose your haiku. And then I've included a stone so they can write their haiku on their stone.
Oh,
So the
cool.
poetry kits are definitely people are interested in them. So and
Mhm.
they've been fun to make.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think that's so cool. So here's what I'm hoping that maybe people will pick up on is, in the spirit of, what I often will say to clients is that there is nothing new under the sun except for you and me. Like
Mm.
we're the only true sense of originality. We're just taking what has been before and bringing it forward and breathing our own uniqueness
Essence into it.
into
Hmm.
it. Yeah. And even in this conversation, you found this idea from someone and then you married it into what you were doing.
Hmm.
And what I'm going to share with what came out of our conversation before this one was we were having this conversation around the poetry kits, and I was, messing around in my own mind about whether or not I would try doing markets this year and do numerology readings. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Kind of in the same way as you don't want to teach haiku, I didn't want to get into people thinking that I'm like a numerologist but I love the idea of introducing these simple insights from numerology to
Hmm.
people and giving them just sort of a doorway into some of this soul-y stuff, these soul insights, right? And getting people curious about, wow, that's really in my birth data. That's kind of
Hmm.
cool, right? And of course it becomes a practice of self-awareness, right? Where you're like, I can actually really see that for myself. Or, oh, I don't know if I ever would have allowed myself to say that about myself. But if it's in my
Hmm.
birth data, maybe I will, right?
Yeah.
So all kinds of things have come up as I've, been playing with this over the winter because I did these pop-ups in coffee shops and
Hmm.
just starting to play with this idea. But where I came back to was if I was going to do markets, I wanted to have something that had a little bit of substance to it. And so I was thinking back to, what you had done with your haikus and cutting them up and making them sort of a project for someone to go and take for themselves. And 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 so now I'm working on that right now. Maybe the next time we do a soul talk, I'll show you where I landed with them.
Mm.
But being able to create just basically little blocks about certain aspects of someone's numerology that they can figure out on their own without having to do anything with me. They can do it on their own,
Hmm.
and take those pieces and go and actually work with them on their own. Because I
Hmm.
do think that tends to be something that I've really observed is that we're super curious about some of this stuff,
Hmm.
but we're like, I don't know if I want to sit down and actually have a conversation about it. Especially post 2020. Who wants to talk to anybody, right? Like we're all still in this place of, I don't want to talk to anybody after that. But I'm also in a different sort of market than a lot of people where there are far more there's more interaction, there's fewer barriers
Mm.
that way. But anyways, I thought I'd share with you that the whole like making like it's just these little snippets of ideas that get carried forward, and then our own original, sort of
Mhm.
creator soul kicks into gear and we're like, oh, and we could do this with that. We could do that. We could take it in this direction,
Oh, totally.
right?
Hmm.
And I absolutely adore that. It's one of my favorite things when I hear about, how people have come up with their, unique contribution, whether
Hmm.
it's creative, quote, or whether it's from a business perspective, or whether it's, how they're approaching, their healthcare, how they're raising their kids, how they're, renovating their house, right? It's all just, pulling bits and pieces from a
Yeah.
lot of
It's
different
it's
people.
almost when you were talking, I was thinking about when I was doing collages. It's the same type of thing. It's like bringing different elements into it and blending it together and
Yeah,
creating
yeah,
something beautiful out of it.
yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I would love to hear a little bit about the connection between haiku and, actually, no. What I would like for you to do first is read us a haiku.
Absolutely. Yes, I can totally do that. So So one thing that I always like, I do a little YouTube video. So I've got my weekly haiku newsletter that I send out, and then I do a little video that goes with it. And I always ring a little bell. That's part of the video. I'm not going
Yep,
to do that now,
yep.
but it's kind of a haiku thing where you read the haiku twice
Mm,
because on the second go you kind of go a little bit deeper into it. And I always invite people to close their eyes because it's very visual. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and take a nice deep breath, and then I'm going to go for it. So, okay. Open window. A white moth flutters through the moonlit night. Open window. A white moth flutters through the moonlit night.
that's really, I love how you are absolutely right. So visual. Like it's just like your imagination, your mind just comes alive hearing the words.
Mhm.
Love
And
it.
what I think is just so beautiful about this, and I think you're going to appreciate this, is that we are so conditioned to be doing and being busy and doing and doing and doing and doing. And haiku isn't about doing anything. It's about being. It's about it's just about appreciating a flower for the beauty that it has. And I believe that we need not need, I don't want to say need. I believe that we're moving. If you hadn't noticed, Trish, the world is changing.
Yes.
I was being a
Just
little
a little bit.
sarcastic there. And I feel that we're moving into a place of not being in that doing. And this is what I find so special about haiku is that it takes you out of the head and it brings you down into the feeling part of it, but it also doesn't tell you to do anything. You just feel it and you experience it
Hmm.
through your own lens.
Yeah, and what's striking me right now is that it's the haiku is staying like a memory of actually having experienced the
Mhm.
haiku.
Mhm.
And I won't be able to tell you the exact words that you used. I just have that snapshot of a memory of the image still in my mind, right?
Mhm.
And I think that that's really interesting. I too believe that we are moving. Obviously, I'm doing a podcast called The New Age Tour Guide, and I talk about becoming sovereign souls and all kinds of stuff over on Substack. And I too believe that the shift is moving into a greater degree of balance between the doing and the being.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Mhm.
it's probably even going to feel maybe like a disproportionate level of being because we've been so heavily influenced by the doing side of things. And here's what's interesting, Anne. I was on a call, I'm going to say last week, maybe Wednesday, and it was a group call, and I hardly do any group calls anymore. But this group call, we were talking about the masculine and the feminine energy, and how the 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 practice of receiving is very much the feminine energy. The practice of being able to receive is very feminine, and it's actually the masculine that is more oriented towards doing, like
Yeah.
putting
Yeah.
action and outward
Mhm.
initiatives and stuff. And I don't know. It wasn't a surprise to me, because it's probably not a surprise to you, because we've kind of studied into those nuanced pieces. And we hear about all of this language about the divine feminine is rising, the divine feminine energy is rising on the planet, consciousness is rising on the planet. Um, but when you bring it back down to the practicality, like the
Mhm. Mhm.
the really practical, like, yeah, but what does that mean?
Mhm.
What does that really mean? And I had this whole moment on the call where I said to myself, and then I ended up sharing, this was my share for the group, was I think it means that we're going to be invited to learn how to receive.
Oh, oh, absolutely. It's so interesting. Sorry, can I?
No, yes, please.
It's so interesting that you say that because this is something that I've started to be doing more late late summer into the fall is this almost a mantra in my head of allow, release, receive,
Mm,
of going into this space of not trying so hard, not pushing, and just relaxing and practicing. It's a
yeah,
process of
it
getting into
is.
this space of just allowing things to unfold and trusting that by almost not to the extent of doing absolutely nothing, but in some ways, when you look at nature, and this is again going back to the haiku and the beautiful connection that it has with haiku, is when you plant a seed, as long as you care for it and you water it, but you know that it's going to grow. It's going to grow. So it's
Yeah,
like that trusting that you're growing even when you're not doing anything.
right,
And
right.
it's just been so mindful of coming into that space of allowing, and I'm not networking as much as I used to. I'm not pushing as much as I used to. Work is things, it's still slow. It's not
Hmm.
like fast, but
Yeah,
something's shifting, something's happening with it,
yeah,
if
yeah.
that makes any sense.
It does, and I love how that kind of actually brings us into this idea of living more in alignment with even just an overarching understanding of nature and the
Hmm.
seasons. And I mean, that could be a whole rabbit hole for people, or a red pill for people, just seeing how out of tune, out of
Yeah.
step
Hmm.
we are relative to the world in its natural form that kind of surrounds us, right? I spend a lot of time, and I'm spending even more time outside this year, which I won't get into, but
Hmm.
um, watching, as you say, the process of planting seeds, and with relative with a relative level of certainty, knowing that they're going to come up. Yes, there are some seeds that don't, but
Right. Hmm.
that in and of itself, to me, could be a whole wisdom test about, what seeds are we planting that are not going to grow. They're just not going to grow for us.
Hmm.
And stop planting them. Stop
Hmm.
trying to plant them knowing that they're not going to grow.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, watching the whole process of that growth cycle, and how, I learned this idea, and I'm still learning it, when I was studying and teaching, and I still teach yoga, but from yoga, this idea of effortless
Hmm.
effort.
hmm
Effortless effort. And nature is a beautiful example, I
Yeah.
think, of effortless effort. There's
hmm
just, um, yeah. And so
What,
when
what,
and it's actually what tips me off when I feel like there's something not quite right, is when I see something that is not moving or not behaving in the same way that nature
mhm.
operates and behaves, right? That's usually a sign for me that there's something that I need to
Not in
be a
alignment.
little skeptical of, right?
Mm-hmm. One thing that I can say since I've started the seasonal living circle is I feel even as a me kind of, I don't want to say, I guess a guide. I wouldn't say teacher, but I'm, guiding people about the seasons through the haiku, is that my relationship with nature has really changed. I feel so much more connected and so much more present whenever I go for a walk now. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I want to touch things.
I so
And
get this.
it's like yesterday I had a little bit of a challenging morning, and around 3 o'clock, I was like called to the beach. I was like, I need to
Mhm.
just exit the scene. And I went straight down to the beach and I took my socks and shoes off and I laid down right on the sand
Nice.
and I stayed there for at least 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And, that's force bathing and that's another Japanese practice. But I'm so much more present, and that's all because of haiku. It's like I find that I still do, it's like I'm human, but
Yeah.
I don't dwell on the past as much as I used to, and I don't worry about the future as much as I used to as well. So these are all
Yeah.
these little lessons that have helped me grow and move through the connection with the haiku and the seasons.
Yeah.
hmm
I love that. I love that. I love, thank you for, first of all, for tying that back to, and this is how the practice has shifted me,
hmm
how the practice has shifted me, how the practice has shifted my experience of the world. And because I think that, this is just my opinion, but I think that there's a lot of different practices out there, mindfulness practices, meditation practices. And I think, I used to hear this all the time from one of the ladies that I worked with, because at the time I was teaching yoga and had my little studio in Calgary. And I would go in and work part time, which I have been like since 2012. I've worked part time somewhere. And I was working with her and she was like, I just I meditated for 15 minutes today. And she looks at me and it was like she was like, so I, gave her what I think she was looking for, which was excitement and encouragement. And that's awesome. That's so great. Right. She's like, oh, it's probably not what you meditate. And I'm like, well, it depends on the day. If it's a Tuesday, I'm only meditating for 15 minutes because
hmm
I have a stacked day. But sometimes, yes, I can sit longer. And this is why I love this idea of haiku as a way of being able to, bringing some creative expansion in, because maybe it's not sitting on a meditation pillow for 15 minutes or an hour. Maybe it's doing haiku for an hour.
but it's almost like a walking meditation.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And these are some of the things that are part of the circle that I've created. I send out 3 emails a week, and they get their Monday. It's Monday moments. So every Monday it's a different haiku
Yeah.
and a message. I have monthly themes. Obviously, it's all broken into the seasons.
Yeah.
And then within each month, I have a different theme that's within the seasons. For example, April, it was all about the cherry blossoms
Love it.
and the connection, the deep connection that the cherry blossoms have with Japan and some of the philosophies that are coming from there.
Yeah.
Um, oh no, I've lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
Well, you were talking about your the like how you were communicating
Oh, okay, I just
and
remembered.
what
Yeah.
the process is for, yeah.
So yeah. So Monday is a message and a video, and then I also have incorporated the lunar phases
Oh yeah, that's powerful.
into each week because the lunar phases are connected to the seasons. So the new moon is the winter season, and that's when you go into stillness,
Hmm.
or you don't have to, but I know what I mean. It represents the nighttime. That's when we're resting, that's when we're sleeping. And then when you move into the waxing moon, that's the spring season. And then that's the awakening, the new beginnings.
Yeah,
And then when we move into the full moon, that's the summer season, which is abundance and fullness.
yeah.
And then you go into the fall season, which is the waning moon. So every week, I will incorporate a little message that's connected to the lunar phases, a little bit of astrology, not
Hmm.
too much, more around the new moons and the full moons.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. And then on Wednesday, I give them a different download. They get the haiku again, just, here it is again.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
a little bit of a reflective moment on the haiku. And then every Wednesday it's a different download. Sometimes like I've been doing the senses for the month of May. And I noticed I loved what you posted on your Instagram a couple of days ago. You had a bird chirping and
Yeah,
you were
that's
talking about
sound
listening.
healing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So last week it was all around sound, and then on Friday okay, so sorry, I was going to say on Wednesday I gave them different little YouTube downloads, like a nature sound bath,
Yeah.
and listen to the whales, listen to us, an actual sound bath. And so I give them three different things to download. But sometimes it's journal. I'm doing this week, it's a new moon. We just have yesterday was the new moon in Gemini,
Yeah.
so it's a
Yeah.
new moon reflections journal. Sometimes it's just mindfulness tips. So it's always a little bit different. I try to change it up.
Love that.
And then on Friday, it's a little bit of a recap of the week, but I also include a little nature activity prompt. For the senses all month. It's, last week it was like go for a nature walk and take a journal with you. Take I always encourage people not to take their phone with them, but it's like if you want to record something that you hear, like
Yeah.
listen to the birds, get really present, listen to the sounds of nature and reflect on it. So it's every Friday, it's a different nature activity. Sometimes it's a creative activity. I try to change that up as well, but that's part of what the circle is.
So that's awesome. And what's really cool for me about having this conversation, there's two things that are really kind of coming to the surface, and then I'm going to bring us in for a close. And that is number one, you would be, I don't know, maybe you won't be surprised. I know I was when I first started seeing it. I get so many people DMing me when I post something on Instagram that doesn't have any music behind it.
That
When
doesn't
it's
have any
either
what?
music,
Oh,
when it's like that bird video of sound therapy, when it is just the pure sound of nature, that one I get mostly. But even when I post and I don't put music behind my posts, when it's just silence, when it's just quiet, I can't believe. And it's very interesting to me. For as much as I post, like I share stuff on my stories on Instagram, but I think I might only posts like once a week,
hmm.
if that. And but yet those are the things that I get comments on, or those are the things that
What
people
kind of
are
comments?
DMing me about. Like, I love that there was no music behind this.
Oh, I thought you were actually going to say the opposite. That
No,
people are
no,
like,
it's
"Where's the
it's
music?"
no, people are like, it gave me time to really read
Mm.
and think or watch,
Yeah.
or like
Yeah.
it gave me space in my mind. And I have really started to take that to heart, um, because I mean, I love music. There's days that I love putting music,
Hmm.
but there's other times where I'm like, no, I get where people are at. And then the nature sounds. I
Hmm.
actually sent something out somewhere else, and it was a video that I shot, um, and it was just all like it was faint. You had to turn the sound up, but there was like three people that were like, "Oh my God!" And the
Mm.
sounds of the water and of
Yeah.
the birds,
Yeah.
and it's like, holy moly,
Hmm.
that's an invitation. I think that's a super invitation.
Can I read you one more haiku before we
Yes, please.
wrap this up?
Yes,
Speaking
please.
of sound.
Yes.
Okay, close your eyes again.
Oh, right.
Morning star, the sound of stillness soothes my soul. Morning star, the sound of stillness soothes my soul.
Hmm. Interesting.
And what's interesting is a lot of people are uncomfortable with silence. Like,
Yes, it's very true. That's exactly
mhm.
what was
I
going through
used
my
to be
head.
like that. It takes time to,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
And I think that's what, this gal that I was working with at the time, when we were doing the whole meditation conversation, I think that's really what it was about. And I've bumped up against that quite a bit as well recently. And, there was a lady in my circle who went through the breast cancer journey. And I was just saying to her I would do some yoga therapy with her if she wanted it. And she wasn't quite ready for that. And that's totally cool. But what kind of came forward was she's not ready to be in that kind of stillness.
Hmm.
She's not ready to create that kind of space for herself to
Hmm.
reflect on that journey just yet. And boy, there's such a space of honor for that, like really honoring what it is that you do need and what you don't need. And
Hmm.
that I think that appreciation for stillness and quiet and that kind of thing, I think it does come. But you're right, it's a process because I
Hmm.
don't know how long ago, maybe 15 years ago, I didn't really care for stillness either or
Yeah.
quiet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Anyways, thank you so
Mm.
much for this conversation. And
Mm.
everybody watching on the replay or live, I really hope that this was something that kind of sparked some creative ideas for yourself. And yeah, so I am going to post Anne's information below, and you can find out more about her. There'll be a bio and along with a couple of links that you can go and learn more about the work that she does with haiku and or graphic design if that's what you're interested in. Um, and we'll just bring it to a close. And thank you so much for joining us. The next, let me just get the calendar in front of me. The next Soul Talk will be in June, and I have, I know I'm going to get her name wrong. Helena uh, Demenchuk. Demenchuk. She's actually from Spain. She runs a
Mm.
coaching group for really high octane women, and so I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation. And more importantly, what prompted her to move from England to Spain in at the height of sort of the shit show between March of 2020 and well now.
Now.
Now I'm really curious because she did make that. It was a very intentional choice that she made for herself. So I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more about the work that she does with women
Mm.
and that intention that she set for herself. So, Anne, thank you again for coming. I'm just so grateful that you were able to be here
Thank you for
talking
having
about
me.
this.
This was fun. Hmm.
Awesome. Okay.